In this video I'm going to show you how to replace the alternator from this Mercedes V6 engine. If you look on the passenger side, you're going to find the alternator down here. If you have the battery light on the dashboard, it's a good idea to check first the battery. You can use a simple battery tester and check the cold cranking amps and also the life of it. If you don't have a battery tester, you can use a voltmeter, start the car, and the voltage should not drop below 10 volts. Also, once the engine starts, the battery should begin to charge and it should rise up to at least 13.5 volts. The best is to be over 14.4 volts. If it does not, then you might have a problem with the alternator or with the wiring between the alternator and the battery. And on the back here, you're gonna find a 13mm nut. That's the positive side, which goes to the car battery back there. And we should find 12 volts. You can see it's a struggle to keep a good contact in there because there is a lot of rust on this connection here. Use a voltmeter with some long wires. Connect one of the terminals on the positive side on the alternator and the second terminal from the voltmeter connected to the car battery, which is located back there. So for example, let's say the alternator is delivering 15 volts and on the battery you've got 14 volts, then you've got 1 volt dropped, and that's because of the connection. So it's important to do this test before you go ahead and replace an alternator because these can be quite expensive and you want to be 100% sure that the alternator is bad and nothing else. Now on some alternators you can also find a voltage regulator on the back of the alternator. Next, with a 15mm, let's release the tension from the serpentine belt. Now the alternator is held on by E14 bolts, one here and one on the bottom here. Now I can get better access to these connections on the back here. I'm gonna first remove the 12 volt delivery line. I will have to disconnect the battery, I have no choice. Okay, now I've got the battery disconnected. Now the thing is that once I disconnect the car battery, the error with the entrance position do not drive will appear again on the dashboard, and that's annoying. Okay, so the main line is out. Let's unplug this, and we've got here a small one as well. Finally, the alternator is out. Now I want to take out this cover. Okay, so we've got here the voltage regulator. It can be removed with a screwdriver. Now this is called the contact point voltage regulator, and what it does, it basically delivers a constant 15 volts to the car battery while the alternator is producing 250 volts. So there are a couple of things that can go wrong with this. First are these two contact points, and they should push constantly on the axle. Then it can be corrosion on this point here where the voltage regulator will contact this little wire here. Especially look for corrosion because this plastic cover is not protecting too much from water and humidity. And as you can see, these pins are almost gone. This should be a lot longer, maybe like this high. Now even on a new voltage regulator, you're gonna see the difference in height of these two pins. Even right now, they are still the same. This one is a little bit higher. And that's made special for the situation when these two pins are getting warmed up. The first one is going to get warmed up is this small one. So when it reaches the minimum level, it will trigger the warning light. Then the alternator will still charge the battery for a little while until this pin will also get warmed up. However, the current is not going to be as high as before. So you have a period of time where you can take the car for a service. Okay, so in my situation, this voltage regulator will still go for a little while because the pins are still pushing on the axle. It does touch on this wire here. So I'm going to connect it back. Now if you have a very close look to the voltage regulator, you can see that pin, it got worn up, half of it, because the voltage regulator was not tightened in all the way by the previous owner, or it's also possible that it got loosened over time. But I don't think so, because this engine doesn't have vibrations and there is no reason for this voltage regulator to just jump off like this if you tight very well these two bolts. Now another things to keep in mind if you are about to replace the alternator is that when you test the voltage and you test if the battery is charging, you actually test this voltage regulator, not the mechanical part, because usually the mechanical part of the alternator can last for a long time since there are not many moving parts. You just have two bearings, and if the alternator does spin very well and freely without noise, then the alternator is in good condition, unless you've got massive oil leaks on it. That can damage it. I've seen this a couple of times where the engine had massive leaks right on the alternator, and even though I replaced the voltage regulator, the alternator was still shut and it could not charge. If the alternator looks dry and clean, relatively clean like this one, this for example is a good looking alternator for its age, you definitely want to inspect the voltage regulator first. The alternator itself without the voltage regulator can produce up to 250 volts. So this is the device which will deliver 14 volts or 15 volts depending of how much is preset to deliver. Now if you want to do a resistance test in between the body of the alternator and these pins, this is the value, 171 ohms. 170 ohms here, nothing here. Now to install the alternator back, the most difficult part is going to be to place this lower bolt down there. So we need to fit the alternator on the bracket there. Okay, so it went in. And the upper bolt should be a lot easier. I forgot to tie the wires. Well, it's still possible to tie them like this. Okay, so this was the movement here, like that. Okay guys, so that was it about the alternator on this car. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. You know, do everything. Subscribe, stay tuned. Go ahead and check out the other videos I made about this car. If you have questions, let me know, and I will see you in the next video.